What is up, everybody? My name is Richard Terrell. I go by Kirby Kid, and I am drinking pomegranate soda. But today we're going to be talking about combat design. We started this series about 2 streams ago, and we're going to be continuing right along. Some of the early questions we asked about combat is how simple can it get? And we considered how few elements you need to actually generate some combat. And combat that's interesting, combat that's worthy of making some of the best gameplay games ever. And then we looked at how people talk about combat. So we looked at Mark Brown's video, and we looked at a little bit of Sudner's video to see what language they use and what things popped up in their discussion. And we cross-compared that with some of the ways that we would talk about combat. But now we're going to actually take a little bit of a deeper dive. I also have popcorn. And today, what's the topic? Oh yeah, how we're going to approach this. So, believe it or not, this topic comes up a lot, and if you already didn't know, this is a stream about game design, so we talk about game design all the time. You're welcome to join us, because we talk about it in our Discord channel, and these streams sort of naturally flow out from the Discord channel. If you want to talk to me directly and ask questions and talk about game design, you can join us in the Discord channel, jump in the voice chat, and actually talk live with me on these streams. But other than that, believe it or not, this question comes up a lot, and people kind of want to talk about what makes combat good, what makes combat in some games better than others. But you know, that's kind of typical for just about every genre and thing on the planet. After people like it, and after they realize they don't like other things like it, then they're like, well, what makes this good and which one's the best? Happens all the time. So one thing we realize is combat is very broad. Mark Brown focused his video on melee combat, but there's so much more to it. Seems like some of the core elements to have any kind of combat is probably some kind of spatial element and timing element, like real time. But maybe you don't need so much space, and maybe you don't need so much of the real time element to get it done. Certainly there's going to be a lot of interesting examples we're going to look at in the future. But because the category is so broad, for me, combat really encompasses just about any action game, right? There's very few action games that don't have what I would consider to be combat. Mostly those are puzzle games. And it's kind of interesting because if there was a fight scene in a martial arts movie or an anime or a show or whatever, and one character is constantly dodging the others, like Aang from Avatar, and like not directly fighting back but dodging around and using moves, you would consider that to be a fight scene. And depending on how cool it is, it can be just as cool as some of the head-to-head 2 people trying to kill each other kind of fight scenes. So really, even in our mind, even in our fiction and what we commonly think about, combat has a lot of different varieties. So for me, I don't restrict things to melee combat. No matter what style of combat you're going for, I think there's a lot of specifics you want to tune for. Like with melee combat, you're really going to be thinking a lot more of startup frames, active frames, and recovery. But for gun-based combat shooters, not so much. For platformers, not so much. And this is Mega Man right here. It's got this jump, very crispy jump, variable height jump. You can tell, like, when I shoot this shot, I can make it go higher and higher. Oop, not like that. What the heck? Stop. So you got a lot of precision right there, like every time the bullets go up higher and higher and higher. So already we got a pretty engaging element. And even if this game wasn't about shooting robots, stop. Ah! Do I have a slide? I totally should have used that. Even if this game wasn't about shooting robots, oh my gosh, this D-pad's so bad. Okay. Do I have a charge? Wow, Mega Man 5, you sophisticated. Like, one was just about hitting targets, right? Kind of like ARMS break the target mode or anything like that. Well, that's still combat to me, and the way you approach it, there's really little difference in punching a target on the screen versus punching a person on the screen that pops up just like a target, right? So I don't think it's very helpful or healthy for us to sort of get too specific and narrow things down too early. Another interesting thing to keep in mind is a lot of people try to talk about games and oh, whoa, you're a regular crystal drop. A lot of people like to think about games in terms of depth, and what they kind of mean is like a lot of viable options, and either that or competitive viability. Like, those are some really handy ways to consider depth, but it's not the only ways, right? And I think, you know, Mark Brown's video was just very surface level and not really extensive, even considering this controller is so bad, considering melee combat games. So at some point he said, like, yeah, you want your games to have all these different moves and the player can explore them, and you got all of them viable because they're balanced somewhat. Like, maybe you want that, maybe you don't. The different kinds of balances that you can have in your game, the different kinds of effects you go for, it just depends, right? Like I said before with Mario, I wonder if I'm gonna get hit again. 1, 2. 1, 2. Okay, what is this? Super long wait, double, and then a triple? But maybe if I just time that, I'm gonna start using my emulator powers. Does this guy chase me if I go through him? No, he just does that all day. Interesting. I didn't know that. So these enemies are much less sophisticated than Mario enemies. Oh my gosh, D-pad, stop it! Oh, whatever. That enemy's a little harder to deal with than it seems, but he's not too aggressive. So, you know, without considering fighting games, without getting too complicated and considering some of the most complex, how about you just jump right when you see a crystal? Will that ever fail me? Crystal jump! Crystal jump! Crystal, crystal. Crystal jump! Crystal! I probably shouldn't have jumped too high right there. There was no point. Crystal! That's crazy. The semi-random, but each one is individually accessible. Hey, thanks! In fact, I'm going to boop. Nice, safe way to observe this jerk. Good. So yeah, before we consider fighting games, before we consider Bayonettas and Devil May Cries and games more complex like that, I like to always start with simple examples because it teaches you a lot about your criteria and what you're going for. Die. That's not the right time to go. That was close. So I think Mega Man is a pretty solid game. This is Mega Man 5. My favorites are 9 and 10 for the most part. And this looks pretty solid so far. And the reason why is because Mega Man sets up so many interesting and clear scenarios with just really... Oh my gosh! What did I just do? Okay. So yeah, if you consider that this is combat, right? Positioning yourself, watching out for enemies, looking at the environment, and maneuvering around the environment, timing your things, timing your shots, you start to get like a lot of different verbs and descriptors to describe what's happening even in Mega Man. This NES style game. Oh my gosh! And I think that's one of the, let me pause it. Does it get quieter? It doesn't get quieter. It's a little loud in my ears, but I can always turn it down like this. There we go. So, we're thinking about combat. We're thinking about... I think one of the easiest ways to start thinking about combat is not all that fancy smancy buzzwords about depth and viability and complexity and all that. And a handy way to do it is just list the distinct and different things that you encounter, right? So if you were talking about a fight scene from a movie, and Jackie Chan, he does all this cool stuff, you're like, oh, remember that time where he grabbed the rope and twisted it around his back and then shot it out? And remember that time he knocked the gun out of that guy's hand by shooting the horseshoe on the rope underneath his foot? Like, remember when he did, like, okay, you'd very easily be able to point out cool thing after cool thing. And I think a handy way to think about gameplay in general, especially combat, is how many unique scenarios does the game offer. And I know not all games are about level design like Mega Man is. Some games are more open, but this is a really simple way to start so you don't get too complex too quickly. Every screen in Mega Man. Hey, Rush. Every screen in Mega Man. Oop, I didn't want to do this. Stop. 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 Every screen in Mega Man is a distinct idea. They do a really good job of varying the environment, varying the enemies, and even though you pretty much just run and shoot all the time, there's all these different sort of risks and rewards and ideas that are conveyed from the arrangement of the level elements. So you could ultimately say that even though action is fairly simple overall, right? Even if you watch action movies, just like people running from something, driving cars fast, punching, kicking, not too complicated there. I was about to get hit. But the very specifics of the movement, the very specific context. Oh my gosh, no! The specific context, that's what gives action its flavor, and that's why we like some movies better than others, right? We're not here to generalize. We're pretty much here to get to very clear specifics and use rush coil. Let's see if I can use it. Oh, what? That's different. It's different. I need to not be in this form. I could have shot it anyway. So mice running on these tiny platforms right here. Oh, thank you. That's a distinct idea. Mega Man levels do a good job of varying, you know, going left and right, up and down, and these weird little shapes that you go in, and even in transition rooms like that, actually preparing me to not get killed by giving me a breather, like cool stuff. Every enemy is its own idea, and enemies are often used in different ways. Like, what did these guys even do? Okay. And they go low under my shots. Interesting. Oh no! This level's had like 3 or 4 of these little stair segments like this. That's because— oh my gosh, that was a little cheap. That's because this level's in a very crystalline theme. Oh no. You gonna let me cheese you? I didn't need to cheese him. And now we get to an end cap with the boss. Each boss is their own idea. And this is really all the reasons why we think Mega Man is good. The different challenges, the different scenarios, and then even on top of that, how you approach these different challenges and scenarios is also a factor. So, I'm going to beat this boss and we're going to switch games. But one of the things I say all the time is, okay, you got an interesting game idea, you think this combat's interesting, tell me— oh my gosh! Okay. Slowdown didn't help, but that's alright. I got plenty of heads. Oh, jerk. Oh. Oh, wow, miss. Ah, slow down, please! No! Oh, you jerk. Oh, so close. No! Good thing he hovered. Oh, I slid in the input. Oh, I jumped. Come on. Oh, trash. I'm in trouble. This controller is the worst. Nice mix-ups, jerk. When he jumps high is when he does his specialty. None of these. Just like freaking Commando. Oh! Come on. Piece of trash. This Xbox D-pad is so bad. I try to slide away cleanly, and then like I just let go of the D-pad, and it's kept flipping Mega Man like standing upright or whatever. I'm like, no! No! This level looks nice. He always opens up with his signature move. And I always get hit by it. I don't think he shoots anything once the thingies are out. Is that true? No, it's not true. Oh wow, you can't even just run that? Stupid diagonal projectiles that I complain about all the time? This guy's all about diagonal projectiles. Slide, please! And maybe you just need to give up on sliding. Oh my gosh, no! Oh, come on! Jeez. It's so slow! Wow. I wonder if there's extra latency because I have joy to key. Wow, slide please. I'm gonna use the analog stick. It's probably better. Oh! He landed on me. Okay. Cheap. I'm back on the D-pad. Why'd I switch? Okay. There we go. Responsive controls. Important for playing video games. Oh my gosh! Oh, that's so trash. Perfectly timed. I hate you! I hate you! Ah! He only fires them in like the very left side and the very right side of the screen, looks like. That's kind of it. That's an alternative one. Oh my gosh, I was about to jump straight into that one. Oh, come on, it was a jump! Slide! Ah! I'm gonna finish you off! One more! No! He's gonna kill me. No! Dies! Jeez. Cool. So yeah, lots of exciting things even happened in that battle. I did a video series called Mega Man 10 Perfect Boss Battle Strategies or something like that. It's on YouTube. Went over every boss in the game, including some of the Wily bosses, and talked about how to... I broke down the perfect strategy to beat them using just M-Buster, right? Very classic way to go about playing a Mega Man game. But that boss is also would be a good one to diagram. What I love about Mega Man bosses is they're really simple. A lot of times they don't even aggro you too hard. It's just about creating sort of a accomplished challenge that's all focused in one room. So you learn their movement, which is usually never too fast, because it would be cheap if the Robot Master just ran you over. And you learn it, you try to adapt, you try to get your footing, you try to get your shots in. And the cool part is, it's relatively easy to dodge stuff, but it becomes that much harder to attack back. Because like I showed you at the start of this Mega Man run, you can shoot at all these different heights. and how far away you are affects, you know, travel time. And since these bullets are not too fast, the very act of aiming and moving in this game is super complex. It's pretty engaging. Like if you want to go with skills here, and we go with timing, it is complex, probably complex right there. And it never not becomes complex because usually so many things are always moving. You got to get out of the way of the boss's attacks. That is always some element of doing two things at the same time. So that's what's cool about Mega Man. There's always two sides to the coin, right? And we could probably get into this a little later, but it's not just the cool things that your game does. Maybe there's three sides to the coin, but it's how the game supports the player sort of doing those cool things, whether it's tutorials, good feedback, things like that. And then, what was the third one? I guess how cleanly the game allows its best elements to shine, and or how much of the negative elements sort of detract from it. Because a lot of games do cool stuff nowadays. Like a lot of games have cool ideas. They got tons of effort put into their style, their graphics, or whatever. And a lot of times there's got to be at least one part missing that really makes it shine. So like, people aren't going to get it perfect. Most game companies aren't going to nail it and get 9s for their games. So being a good critic and even understanding what combat is and the variety of combat gameplay out there involves a juggling and a balancing act between understanding what it's going for, understanding what holds it back, and playing somewhere in the middle. So, let's see if they have a pac-man. Mega Man is a game with not a lot of moves. Pac-Man is a game probably with the fewest moves of all. He can only move up, down, left, and right. And yet, Pac-Man gameplay is really interesting and engaging, and you get into a lot of different scenarios despite playing on the same map over and over and over. And I can even play this game with one hand. And spill everything. And eat popcorn. So, you know, the AI goes back and forth between scattering and chasing. Now they're in chasing phase. When you see them reverse directions. Oh, what the? Now this analog stick is not good enough. Scatter phase, so the red goes to the top right corner. Now they're chasing me. Now they scatter. And this AI is just pure random. And it goes like this. Oh. Ah! My goodness. This analog stick is so bad. But even in this simple gameplay, you get a lot of different interesting scenarios like chasing enemies, corralling enemies, narrowly dodging enemies, faking out enemies like this. I just made Pinky go away because I know Pinky's AI. Oh my gosh, I can't control! And you get cool reversals, right, using the power pellets. How dare you? And you find that even though you may not have a lot of specific language to describe all these different scenarios, they are distinct and they are memorable, and they're what make the gameplay so good. There's a lot of them. And because the positioning is so continuous and the elements are numerous, you know, unless you're going for like a perfect run or whatever, a lot of these scenarios are always going to be different for you. As tiny differences in your timing and tiny mistakes that you make change what happens later. Rippling forward. I can't control this. Just like Gene. What's up with Gene? I'm in trouble now. Oh. I love the cherry item in Smash Brothers. Always trying to ambush me, Clyde. And then you can do stuff like this to try to get the reversals to happen a little bit smoother. It's a cool game. It's got a lot going for it. Everything's clear on one screen. Progress is obvious due to the dots. I tell people, like, this may not look like a combat game to you, but honestly, with the sort of ease at which a lot of action games make their basic attacks, right? Like God of War or something where you just hit a button and huge attacks come out. Like, that's not significantly harder or at all harder than some of the stuff you see here. I need guilt. There we go. So if you think this is like trivial, well, it's not trivial. Eat them! I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble. There we go. I knew Clyde wasn't going to get me because he likes ambushing. And Blinky's on my tail. But Clyde, yeah, goes away. Ah, Clyde's the orange one, if I recall correctly. And there's Blinky here. Pinky will... Yep. I think that was a switch into the scatter phase. Oh my gosh! Why are you so aggressive? Yeah, you'll get a lot of surprising cases. You'll get a lot of varied scenarios. And with just a little bit of creativity, you can see how this would be the same kind of core stuff that you would see in a combat game. Like, okay, let's say subtle little difference that happens here when Pac-Man eats a pellet, he slightly goes slower. When he doesn't eat a pellet, he goes faster. That's kind of like using ink in Splatoon, you know, carving out your territory, and once it's inked, you know, you can move through it differently. And getting positional advantages, right, to turn the tables on your opponents. That could be a switch built into the level that does something. It could be a power-up. It could be a weapon. Happens all the time. And just because Pac-Man's essentially just ramming them. And because he rams them in this game, that close-range attack is so... I mean, it's like a close-range melee attack. That's what physical hand-to-hand melee combat really is. So it doesn't take too much of an imagination to see how the setup you have here is using the same kinds of dynamics and of space and time to create its interesting gameplay, just like you would combat. So you can kind of think, even without a lot of moves like Mega Man or Pac-Man, even without a lot of space like Pac-Man, it's single screen, we can do a lot. It's really all about understanding what makes the moves that you have varied in the first place. Some games give you moves that are really limited. Some games give you moves that are super variable. And I always say, okay, 99% of games use space and time as their some of their core gameplay systems / dynamics. But not a lot of games build their interesting gameplay out of moving through that space and using that space. So Pac-Man is all about moving through the space. There's nothing else to do in this game. But other games, even though you have like a character and a sword or whatever, depending on how they design the enemies, depending on how they design the environment, depending on so many factors, the space you're in could be rather insignificant. It could just be there for a backdrop or whatever. The distance between you and the things you're killing or attacking or whatevering, it may not be that important to calculate, depending on how overpowered you are or whatever other dynamics are going on. So a handy way to... And now we're going to go to Super Mario Brothers. Super Mario Bros. This is so handy. So a handy way to think about and get on the ground floor of understanding combat is listing scenarios, right? Listing distinct gameplay challenges or techniques or situations that you encounter while playing the game or could encounter. So here's an interesting challenge for you guys. There's a Goomba. We all know him. He's dead. Let's see if I can do the trick. There we go. Here's another Goomba. There's a Goomba. Down a pipe. Here's two Goombas. So, the question is, the Goomba is one of the most simple enemies in Mario, but there's a lot going on with that little dude, especially depending on where he's put in the level and what's going on around him. But with just a little bit of thought, you might think, okay, well, he's cool and all, but he can't be like infinitely cool. There's not like an infinitely interesting Goomba game. The depth of this Goomba, the different scenarios, varieties, setups that you could encounter with this little dude isn't like super, isn't huge, right? But what is that number exactly? Well, here's a different question that's getting at the same kind of basic idea. How many different cases or examples, what do I want to say? How many times are Goombas actually placed in levels in the original Mario Brothers? I'll pause it. And that's an interesting way, critical gaming time, to think about this. Let's go with variation. Melodies. Archives. Let's go to variation part 2. Tasty. 3? Where is it? Mario Melodies Variation Part 1. Not there. Where did I put it? Okay, I'm gonna have to use Google. Critical Gaming Goomba. Never hurts. It's my image, I'll steal it if I have to. Visit. Doop. Huge picture, yay. Okay, so apparently, hopefully I did this pretty accurately, but I went through the entire game and I snapped a little picture of every single Goomba sighting or example in the game. And as we just saw from 1-1, that's our friend. And here's right underneath them 1-1-1-1 as well. Here's 1-1 as well, and here's 1-1-1 as well. Well. And here's 1-1-1-1-1 as well. And it goes from top to bottom in order of chronology. Here's the Goombas in 1-2. You're like, oh, cool, Goomba. Well, lots of Goombas. This game has so many Goombas. But then, 1-3, and then other levels for something, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, he kind of goes away for a while, and then he appears on World 4, or wait, 3 or 7. Then at the end of the game, the final cave, and that's it. Goombas are no longer used in the entire game. And like in your memory, you might think, oh, there's a ton of Goombas. They're everywhere. Always kill Goombas. But really, I think each one of these scenarios are different, or different enough, right? This is your first Goomba, your first enemy, classic 1-1 intro. This is kind of putting a little bit of danger down the bottom of the pipe with the height that you jump over. Let me see if I can draw on the screen. No, wrong screen. So this is, I need a different color. I need a red. Can I do that? Cool. So this is Mario jumping on the pipe. There's one Goomba over here. Now they doubled up the Goomba and the pipe's taller because it's the same pipe as that one. And then it's a similar situation as the intro of the game. But this time there's one brick, 2 Goomba down here. There's 2 Goomba over here, so the progression is increasing. And Now this is a classic falling Goomba trap. Lots of cool things happening here. This is a double Goomba setup, double. So if you're kind of used to jumping on Goomba, maybe jumping on this one catapults you forward in this dip right here, and you get hit by this one. Maybe jumping off the first one does a classic Goomba reverse face, and then when you're trying to jump on this one carefully, you're like, oh no, I'm getting pinched from both sides. Something that could happen. I'm pretty sure it's happened to somebody. But then now two closer Goombas, right? So all the Goombas prior have a space in between them. Space. Yeah. Space. Now these two close Goombas. And I think they spawn like that. Bros 1, I think, does a thing where if they're going to make a cluster of Goombas, they spawn them all in together so that they're not like slightly misspaced because of the screen scroll. So this should be a tight pair. Or maybe I glitched it, but whatever. Now it's underneath a solid line of things. Never seen that before with two Goomba. Goomba stairs, triple Goomba. It's the first triple. And then Goomba in this weird contraption, very tight spaces. Falling Goomba this time, but without bricks to break them from underneath. Goomba on the top ledge. But there's this enemy that goes up and down and gets in your way, the Paracoopa. Right here. Single Goomba, but taller stairs. Double Goomba, but inside of a trap because of this pipe. Because of this pipe here. And now you have a Koopa shell that could probably bounce back or forward and hit the Goombas. And this low-hanging sort of blockage right here that we saw previously. But now the whole scenario is more complex. Triple Goomba underneath some blockades. Double Goomba in front of an awkward pit. Triple Goomba on top of a elevated structure that quickly turns into stair Goombas, right here, stair Goombas from the upper Goombas. Two Goombas down below, kind of like the intro to 1-1. I'm not sure what's to the right of this, but do you get something from breaking these bricks? Because if so, that makes this area a little bit trickier. The similar situation before with the Koopa, I showed you with the Koopa and the double shell, or the double Goomba right here. But this one is a Koopa and a triple Goomba. And the reason why that's significant is not because the shell can kick through multiple enemies. It's because if you ever tried to skip over this, or kick the shell backwards, or jump over some but not all the Goomba or all of them, that all yields slightly different timings and slightly different sort of consequences that ripple forward. So this isn't trivially different from the other one. It's significantly different. And then single Goomba falling down, low jump, nothing too special about that one. The final triple Goomba in a small low hanging area, and the final Goomba stairs in front of or behind a pit that's behind a bullet bill. So there's a lot of action going on here. And then no more Goombas, right? Can you even think of a scenario where the Goomba would be like distinct from any of these? You only have one Goomba, two Goomba, or three Goombas to use. And just thinking about Super Mario Bros. 1, can you think of a situation where you're like, no, there's one more thing they didn't do with the Goomba, like 6 Goomba. Like, I don't think that's possible to have 6 Goomba. Just understanding the limitations of the NES. But, yeah, the clusters get no bigger than 4, but this is like a 2 and 2, so the clusters really almost get no bigger than 3 no matter what you see. And that's just the kind of meaningful variation there is with the Goomba. The reason why the Goomba and all these scenarios can be this varied, this is how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. 22 different scenarios for the entire game of Super Mario Brothers based on one enemy. It's pretty good. But the reason it can do this is because, like I showed you before, the Goomba, even though it's the simplest enemy in the game, probably not the simplest. It has a lot going on for him. The fire bars are simpler than the Goomba. The Podoboos are simpler than the Goomba. The fish are simpler than the Goomba. Goomba's actually complicated, and it's one of the first enemies they show you in the entire game, which says something. So, the reason why all those arrangements can have what I call meaningful variation is all these different scenarios here outlined. So this is like the design space of a Goomba. One Goomba or one setup of a Goomba can't do all these. They can only do maybe one of these, one branch of these at a time. So you're like, oh, this is all the potential interesting things that can happen when encountering a Goomba. And, you know, just thinking back on it, like, do all these scenarios happen? I know we had at least 2 Goomba dropping down a pit. So that covers, or I'll probably zoom out a little bit. I'll just do this. So we had 2 Goombas dropping out of the pit. That covers that. We had a triple Goomba with lots of space on top of it. Should have. Let me flick back over real quick. Where's our triple Goomba with lots of space on top? Oh, right here. Okay. We had this one. Oops. We had a single Goomba jump over, obviously. We had a single Goomba pit. We had a single Goomba jump on. We had plenty of cases where the double Goomba setup would yield these results. This is, I think, a screenshot right out of... No, maybe I made that up. But this is like World 1-1 where the Goombas were falling down. There was one other place where there was a double Goomba falling down. Right here. And I'll do this and this. Let's go to these scenarios. This is the scenario from 1-1 where you can hit Goombas from below. You can double jump Goombas, obviously. Here's another scenario you can hit Goombas from below. This is the Goombas drops on you scenario, actually. Classic case of big Mario, small Mario differences between Goombas. And then there's even a scenario beyond this where you hit a coin block so it doesn't destroy and you can kill Goombas. But with limited ammo, that's a cool scenario that happens. Let me see if that actually happens. So there's no situation in this game where Goombas are on top of coin blocks or can get on top of coin blocks for that to happen. There's this one over here on the left with Mario, and then there's this one over here on the right with some Goombas, but there's none that let Mario hit coin block Goombas from below. When you have your power-up, all these scenarios here are possible. And I showed you 2 situations where the Goomba were positioned after Koopas. And clearly, that's almost everything that I charted out. So every possible thing I could think of abstractly is represented concretely through the level design. I'll show you what I mean. Everything here in design space, this is an abstract way. A design space is a way of organizing and understanding the various elements that gameplay and levels are composed of. It outlines the game's potential. See potential here. It outlines the game's potential as well as its functional creative limitations. This topic includes emergent possibilities that are not level specific, like matchups in a fighting game. But then we compare the ways we analyze games here for the potential with how they're actuated, which is level design, the arrangement of player, level, and enemy elements to create gameplay challenges, to communicate ideas and convey experiences. Should be create experience and convey ideas. It doesn't matter. So yeah, this is the kind of specificity I would look for if somebody were doing any kind of an analysis on combat. But even if they're not like super hardcore or into criticism or into game design, like thinking of cool things that happen and be like, did you do that cool thing that happened? That's what this is. This is just organized. I really feel like there's not a huge difference between game players, designers, and critics, right? I feel like the best of those things, of those individual roles, include experience from the other roles. So like the nice middle point between the 3 of those would be the person able to both do their job the best and build bridges the best. That's the theory, at least. But I feel like normal players think about games like this. I mean, it may take some pencil and paper sometimes to get it clear, but I feel like this is how we talk and think about video games all the time. Like, did you see that jerk enemy? You see that one boss? He was cheap. Like, that's you understanding its comparison between all the other bosses and the expectations and the potential outlined in the game abstractly. That's a very designy type way of thinking about things. And if you push it further, you actually start thinking like a designer instead of just like, that thing was hard. That's just like a random comment that anybody can make. So I want to challenge people and encourage people and focus people on talking about games, talking about scenarios, and not worrying too much about the minutiae. Not worrying too much about, well, that game is cheap and this game is broken and this strategy is this. Like, don't worry about that. Get yourself some nice... Oh no! No. It's frame rate. Not the best, but I'll take it. This game's so freaking smooth. So... did I have this one? Goomba underneath these thingies? I think those were these. Oh, I have the double. What did I do? Maybe I didn't get the Goomba underneath the coin. Maybe there's more Goomba sightings than this, and these are the ones that are original. As far as their setup goes. Who knows? I made this picture such a long time ago. I'm not going to think about it too much. This game's so smooth. Cool. So there are other games. Let's see. So I guess I'll end by saying, so if you don't sort of overemphasize combat too much and think too narrowly about it, you're really just talking about games. All different kinds of games, all different kinds of scenarios, action games, really. And knowing that this entire wheel of topics and concepts is probably open to you and relevant for the discussion, maybe not story, but who cares? That means there's a lot to potentially cover, a lot of different angles to think about games with combat, a lot of different ways to think about enjoying games with combat, and issues that may pop up for different skilled players, different groups of players, different play styles, so on and so forth. So in other words, there's not going to be any easy way to talk about combat. There's not going to be any handy-dandy rule of thumb that you can just apply to a bunch of games and try to come to some meaningful, insightful conclusion. Just like with analyzing any games, it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to require some organization, some discipline, focus maybe, and anyone who doesn't do that work is really underestimating how complex games are. Like I used to say that all the time, games are complex. Freaking stop underestimating that. Like this wheel is just a small piece, and like I created this wheel slowly over the years on from my blog by writing about one thing at a time and trying to find a language to describe things really clearly so that I could get to this point where the entire wheel is inside my head and I can very clearly navigate between one thing or the other. I organize a lot of the topics into these courses, and each of them have these subtopics with articles that you can read, walking the entire thing up complexity-wise, and down here the rest of the courses. It's just a cool way I thought of organizing my blog. But this stuff is still good, still incredibly relevant, and even though this was the articles of me teaching myself as I went along, like I haven't found better material on most of these topics. So like, take that and do what you will with it. The way people talk about fun is so irritating, so I wrote this long series on it. Talked about time, complex time and design space, abstract ways to understand games better on a high level. Talked about what nuance is and how game states mirror our mental states for when talking about skill and learning. Talked about unintuitive and eureka moments, and did a whole long thing on story design and storytelling, about feedback and clear communication through your game, all these other things, metaphors, just in general, how metaphors apply to games and game design. Back to the basics, what is gameplay? After going through 8 courses, we go back again and reevaluate it and see if all that language and all that rigor we applied helps us understand gameplay better. Talked about controllers. Look at this long series just talking about controllers, each input style and what they're good and bad for, and how that has shaped games and the way people react to those things. Opinions on and analysis on save systems and abstraction in terms of art, the limits of art and design, all this stuff. Fun stuff. So don't underestimate a topic like this. Next up, we're going to be talking about skill, because that seems to be a big one that pops up. And after doing this long examination of skill series, which hopefully I'll be able to give you a crash course in one way or another, my conclusion is skill is really not that big of a consideration with games, and it's not worth arguing about. It's cool to talk about, but it's really not a sticking point in any meaningful argument, I think. Or most meaningful arguments that I've come across about games and combat talk over the internet. So look forward to that. Sneak peek. When I was developing that series, my brother and I worked on these 4 games. And if you remember the D-cart system, these are the DKTR parts of the D-cart. And we made these games to test your knowledge, like your ability to have knowledge skills in a very general way. So these are mini games made to test your skills and not worry too much about applying that skill to anything else. It's more like a brain age style test. But it got one for your dexterity, one for timing, and one for reflex. So yeah, if you didn't know that I like data and charts, you're going to really know it after this, because each one of these games has charts and charts and charts, and we'll take a look at that next time. Tomorrow's Labor Day. I may skip it, skip the stream. I may skip the entire day. I may skip the stream. I may do whatever, so who knows. But if you're interested in more getting super, in-depth about this stuff, if you're interested in talking about game design and combat, you should really join our Discord, or at least send me a tweet or something. Leave a comment on Facebook or however you're viewing this, because I could just keep talking to the camera all day, but I'd much rather talk to a person and have them play these games and see how they react to it live and discuss things, because I think that's more interesting. But if you don't, then continue to do what you're doing. But until next time,